Season 9 has changed the game in one of the biggest ways ever, but it's already changing again. The Wrecking Ball and Zenyatta meta that came out of it barely had time to settle before some major Hoff exchanges switched things up again. Let's get into the new tank tier list that's come out of Zen and Tracer nerfs, as well as Zarya and Hog buffs, and not to mention a ton of projectile size nerfs. If you're looking to rank up on your favorite heroes, check out the link in the description below to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are tons of guides and courses that can level up your game and help you get better, faster. Make sure to check it out and enjoy the video. Roadhog isn't that much better. He's gone from F tier to D tier, even though he's got one of the most impactful changes this patch. His damage reduction during Take a Breather is now back to 50%. Unless he's using it at lower than half health, he's basically unkillable, but although Hog can reduce his damage taken, he's still at the mercy of the DPS passive. He heals himself less, and it's impossible for him to be pocketed by healers in the front line. He'll eventually die if the enemy team has just one high damage output DPS like Soldier or Hanzo. Even if the two got their projectile size reduced this patch, Roadhog has the most generous hitbox in the game. Even his head hitbox is easy. And that's only how bad Roadhog is when he's not being fully countered by the enemy team. He's both a bad hero and countered by some of the best ones, like Ana, Zen, and Sojourn. She especially becomes way more effective with the Hog to always build rail charge off of. And although Roadhog has a good matchup into a lot of tanks, he just is so bad into most DPS. All of them deal way more damage to him now, and he's basically just an ult battery when the enemy DPS are trying. And of course there are heroes like Mauga and Orisa that totally gatekeep him from ever peeking aggressively. It is very much still rough out there. Now one tier up in C tier, we're starting with Reinhardt. Even with Zen nerf, it's not changing the matchup. If you want to play aggressively as Rein, you have to go really fast to the point of being able to dive in deep with your charge, and there are obviously way better tanks for that. Otherwise, his shield is there to hold space. The other shield tanks all still deal damage while they're shielding, so it's way easier to make forward pushes. It's not a great state to be in, but until his shield breaks, it does do a really good job. It blocks the DPS passive for him and his team, but it's very easy to play a team comp that has enough damage to break Rein's shield. It'll make it really hard to force the objective, and even harder to rotate onto any killable targets. And along with Roadhog, he barely gets any advantage from his extra health. Going for more than one swing still puts you in a lot of danger. If you lose half your HP or even just your armor, you can easily lose the fight just because it'll take so long to heal you back up. What other tanks can do that Rein can't is deal damage back. All the frontline tanks that are better than Reinhardt this season have really effective spam. Rein just has his fire strikes. And one of those frontline tanks is right up next, Orisa. She is specifically good against Reinhardt, but she's only one spot higher in the tier list. She has her own problems, but keeping Rein and Hog in check is simple. All you need is primary and secondary fire. Her damage output is really only average, although with no fall off, it's especially good against tanks playing far away. But Orisa isn't really that good at spamming. At long distances, not only is it way harder to deal even half your damage output, but you expose yourself to a lot of damage when you do. She still dies really slow with how much armor she has, but it's also harder to heal up with no way to consistently block the DPS passive. Even with high value defensive cooldowns, they don't help her spam like Sigma or Rampart can with her shields. You can't shoot during Javelin Spin, and Fortify has way too high of a cooldown to be blown on trading damage. Even as a range spamming tank, it's better to focus on denying damage to yourself than dealing it. At the top of C tier is Mauga. He's a more upgraded version of Orisa just with the stun on his ultimate, although his damage output is high enough that it makes up for not having it every 6 seconds. His range is also better, and so is his maximum damage output. Even though Orisa's Fortify and Javelin help defend against Mauga's chain combo burst damage, she can't fight back and forces Cardiac Overdrive, which is just a team-wide mini Fortify with lifesteal. 30% damage reduction on your whole team is impressive, but he's not able to use it very often, and without it, it's very hard to take angles. Mauga's range is only trumped by his massive hitbox, and even though he's very survivable, it's the aggressive pressure that matters. Just like Reinhardt, he actually gets gatecapped from pushing into close range for maximum damage. He just has a way more practical charge. Moving up to B tier, we've got our first dive tanks, starting with Doomfist. His abilities are really good for engaging, but his primary fire damage is still really inconsistent. It's where he falls off compared to other dive tanks. He can deal enough damage even with only 4 shots at a time, but the range and consistency is down. They're easier to hit with the projectile buffs, but you also need to hit at least one more for every kill, because everyone but Tracer and Widowmaker have at least 50 health extra. If you really get in the zone, you can do a lot, but it doesn't make Doom any easier to play. You still have to account for the extra poke damage whittling you down every fight. If you're not sneaking around, it's easy to tell where you are thanks to Doom's very loud ability sounds, but at least getting powered punches is a lot easier. Doom is underrated, but a well-placed super punch can easily win fights without any ultimates needed. Next we've got Winston. He can get beaten by most tanks, but 75 DPS against supports is really good. If you're able to get onto the backline consistently and then survive, you're already winning the game. Doing that is a little bit hard though. Winston's good because of his fast, long-range mobility, heal blocking bubble, and his cleave damage, but the first two can be easily denied if you aren't careful. Winston can jump really far, really fast, but it's not like Genji's dash. It can be booped and stunned pretty easily. That's already a lot of heroes in the game that can counter a Winston engage, and there's even more if you consider the heroes that are especially good at breaking his bubble. It's really powerful, but easily bursted down. Although another good thing about Winston is that his mobility is also on a pretty short cooldown, and it starts at the beginning of your jump, which means that sometimes when you land, it's only 3 seconds until you can go again. He's got enough damage that he can carry with it, but you still need a lot of experience with him to know his limits. Next up, we're moving on to A tier, starting with Junker Queen. After the projectile changes and the spread buff a while back, she's a lot better in lower ranks too. Her damage is really consistent, and even though she's not your usual frontline bully, she's amazing as a third DPS that helps poke players out. out. Her knife and shotgun have great range too, so you don't always have to get into close range if it makes you easier to collapse on. And of course, in close range, she does have a great advantage, with both her carnage and melees to survive with, but it's not enough against the Ram and Mei pushing with 2 slows and a wall. In 1v1s, she's amazing, and although her ultimate is really tough to use, it can also often be an instant unblockable fight win. Although a lot of supports can dodge it, not all of them can cleanse it. Even Lifeweaver's Life Grip doesn't remove the anti-effect, which still puts you down to half health if you get hit. Next spot in A tier goes to Zarya. Her damage levels and increased beam size make her pretty lethal at all energy levels. She's way more consistent with her damage. Her bubbles do still kinda suck though. Just like Queen, she'll die to a Ram Mei pushing with the same 2 slows and a wall. Her bubbles die instantly to focus fire, so a lot of the time you can't play in the ideal Zarya range, but just like any other ranged DPS, Zarya can abuse high ground and her vertical movement is solid with her grenade jumps, so she's not that immobile for a slow frontline tank. If her bubbles had any more utility, she would be way better, but right now she can still dominate if left unchecked. Now that DPS are way more lethal with their heal reduction passive, friendly bubbles are even better for helping them do their job. If you send an Echo or Genji with a barrier, they're almost guaranteed to get a pick. Halfway through A tier is Wrecking Ball. Even without Zen being a must pick, he fits well into the new normal. He's even better against Zen without that extra 25 health. You can kill him in as little as around 2 seconds flat, and as more people play him, it's becoming clear that Pile Driver isn't too bad. It's not always easy to confirm a lot of targets, but with bigger bullets comes bigger follow-up on your slams. Ball is also especially strong when you know his limits. Just like Winston, timing your engages and disengages has to be good or you'll feed a lot more. You can basically always survive a slam engage if you just don't follow up with your damage and instead roll away. If you can, you'll want to help confirm a pick, but surviving is way more important. It's where Ball really shines on ranked. Surviving more means both dealing more damage and keeping the enemy team's attention split for longer. And on payload maps, he's the main guy for cart pushing. Wrecking Ball can turn 2 fights into 1 without any risk just by forcing the objective. But for the top 3 tanks, we need the most consistent heroes that can both hold their ground and push forward. First up is Sigma, still in A tier. Even without the hotfix, more and more dive heroes were being played, but Iliari and Junkrat both got buffs, and the projectile size nerfs aren't devastating. Soldier's bullets were just decreased by 0.03, and Hanzo's arrows are only decreased by 0.025, an even smaller difference, especially relative to the previous size. Spam heroes are still pretty elite, and with Tracer being less powerful, there's also a good use for Sigma's shield to give your team an advantage in the DPS matchup. It's also really useful that Sigma is still one of the best duelists in the game. A lot of tanks don't win as many 1v1s as before because of the bigger bullet size and heal reduction passive. Sigma though has the perfect loadout to win 1v1s, and even hold off 1v2s. His shield to hold space and shoot freely, his rock to set up a kill, and his grasp to rotate away safely. Although he can get overrun in fast rush comps, even the best rush heroes are still weak to getting hit by a rock. At the very least, Sigma can always trade a lot of damage and abilities, and because of his range, you don't even need to be playing in dangerous positions. He's a hero that can win by just spamming and zoning the objective, which is always really valuable and easy to play around. But for the top 2 heroes, their only drawbacks are their weakness to Zen. He's a lot easier to kill, especially for D.Va at the top of A tier. She's got everything she needs to farm. Her Matrix is always amazing, obviously, and her armor pool and damage are better than ever. As the only auto shotgun hero, she gets a pretty insane advantage from the bullet size buffs. She's way better at bursting heroes down, and her range is even better too. It helps a lot with matchups against Zarya and Queen. They'll have to play further away if they want to be dealing more damage in the duel. Not only is she doing better into her counters, but she can also delete any hero with a hitbox bigger than Ana. Her burst damage is both high and really fast. Boosting it to someone with your micro missiles and cannons firing is a lot of burst, and Defense Matrix is a perfect follow-up against defensive abilities like Biotic Nade and Suzu. D.Va was and still is a very defensive dive tank, but now when she needs to pump the gas, she keeps up easily. Now at the end of the tier list, we've got once again Ramattra, now alone in S tier. Zenyatta made him way harder to play, but he was still really strong, and now he's very clearly the best brawl tank. Before the fight starts, he lays down solid damage. It's enough to trade damage against spam comps and to get extra burst if you're being aggressively pushed. They'll be running into a stream of projectiles and into your shield, which is more than good enough to block high spam damage or abilities. It's also a great gap closer and space holder, and the big finisher is his Nemesis form, which at 7 seconds comes up often and it gives you access to block. 75% damage reduction is the ultimate trump card when both teams are trying to run each other down. Right now, tanks need to be able to survive and set up their team, more than just farm the enemy tank or dive in deep looking for picks. Ram has the range to burst with his punches to commit on backline when he needs to, but more importantly, he can play slow. He's so good at holding space that he can force abilities just by existing. For the top tank, he's not especially oppressive, but he's definitely hard to kill. That's it for the top tanks in Season 9. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.